Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Fighting the Void. I am Ginger, and I am here again. As you see, I am without my wonderful co-host, Crystal. She is off taking care of some things, but rest assured, she will be back most likely on the next show. Also, returning today, classing the join up, much better than I can do all by myself, is Paige Rogers. And and Paige is, if you remember, she's a repeat guest. I think this is Paige. I think this is your third time on the show.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, wait. I think we've had you. Is it just 3 or is it 4 times now? Yeah, I think it's your fourth time on the show. Now that I think about it,
Maybe so.
because we had you on to talk about Israel. Then we had you on to talk about your coverage on the MLK thing on Pastor MacArthur. Yeah, MacArthur. And then we had you on talking about, or maybe that was the same episode that we talked about other troubles of the Protestant world.
Yeah, that was the same episode.
Yeah, the same episode. Okay, so this is only the third time. All right, so our topic for today is we're going to be talking about the Catholic abuse crisis, because that is, last time Paige was on, we talked about issues going on in the Protestant world, which they've got their own abuse issues, as Paige has covered very well over at Knock Report. But of course, getting the press are the issues in the Catholic Church, and it's just that we get some press for this. I've covered it a lot on this channel on my own, but since the last time I really did anything on it, there has been a summit in Rome discussing the issue, and also I was not expecting this one, but Pope Emeritus Benedict decided to drop a bombshell into the mix. With kind of weighing in his 2 cents about the cause and everything. So we're going to be discussing that. And before we get started, we're going to do a little bit of a recap, get everybody up to speed on what's been going on. First, before I do that, Paige, do you have any idea what that... I'm getting a lot of hissing in the background.
It's my computer. It's the fan.
Oh,
it's
my
just
goodness.
Running.
That fan...
and it's raining really hard.
Okay. So we apologize for the background noise. It's going to be there. So maybe I can edit it. Maybe I can minimize it and post for an audio version. We'll see. Post. Yeah, I do that. Sort of. Sometimes. Maybe. So anyway, a really quick recap of the Catholic abuse crisis up to now. For those who remember, and Paige, you're old enough to remember this. Back in the early 2000s, things started to break, where it just seemed like scandal after scandal after scandal after scandal was hitting the airline, was hitting the headlines. There were studies that were done. There were massive meetings. There was a big meeting with the U.S. bishops and everything in Dallas that came up with new procedures and policies to deal with this. Now, one of the things we learned from the studies was that almost all of this was happening. It had happened from the 60s to the 80s and dropped off sharply since. Now, since 2006 with the Dallas meeting, as far as we know, cases is again dropped off sharply after that. Now, what caused this latest wave, the reason this is all in the headlines again, there was a grand jury report that got released from Pittsburgh. And that described in gruesome detail a lot of these abuse cases. And there were a number of priests that were implicated in this, numerous cases. And it was very clearly a network. These guys knew each other. They were covering for each other. And there were even some bishops that were implicated in the cover-up. And there have been a host of other such things going on around the country. Now, for the most part, these are still fall into that 60s to 80s time period as far as when the abuse actually happened. It's just that we have more detail about it now that's out in the public. Of course, but still, the horrific nature of the details really boosted this in the public consciousness. Now, also, there was a letter from Bishop Vigano. he used to be the nuncio, like the ambassador from the Vatican to Washington, D.C. And he made some big claims about people like Cardinal McCarrick and a whole bunch of other people in the high hierarchy in the Catholic Church, up to like the people who control what information gets to the Pope. And that is exactly the claim that he was making, that these guys were preventing information from getting to like Pope John Paul II and Pope Benedict. He actually accuses Francis of knowing about some of the stuff, and especially about Cardinal McCarrick. That was interesting. That kind of set the stage for this latest blow up. Cardinal McCarrick he's actually since been laicized. He's boom, you're out, pal. But it took a little while to get there, longer than I would have liked, especially since it turns out a lot of people knew about this. So that kind of catches this up. That's the short version of how we started and how we got to where we are now. Now, Paige, I'm sure you're aware that there was a big summit in Rome that was supposed to deal with all of this. And what do you know about that? And actually, and for the before we get there, full disclosure, I'm Catholic. I'm a convert of 15 years now, almost 16. No, wait, yeah, 15 years now, and Paige is not. You're Episcopalian, correct? Or am I off on that?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, all right. Okay, so just so everybody knows where we stand, I'm definitely a diehard Catholic, and it gives me no joy to be talking about this stuff at all. Hate it, but truth is truth. So, Paige, so from where you're at, what were your impressions of what went on with the summit in Rome? And yeah, I don't know. Your impressions, if you will.
I think a lot of disappointment, honestly. For just off the top of my head, first thing that comes to mind is that, and how do you say his name? Did you say Vigino?
Vigano. I could be wrong. I could be wrong about the pronunciation.
Okay, I thought it was Vigano.
Yeah.
He was not invited. As far as I know, he's still in hiding.
Right.
When he really brought a lot more to light, in addition to the Pennsylvania cases.
Yes. And
additionally,
I'm sorry, Paige. For anyone who wants to know more about what he said, you can either look it up online or you can go back on this channel, and I went over all of that in detail, kind of as it was breaking. Sorry, Paige. Go ahead.
Additionally, the summit was originally supposed to address both preventing child sex abuse as well as preventing the abuse and exploitation of adults, especially seminarians. They're considered vulnerable adults in this instance. And when the summit rolled around, it only focused on the children and not on the adults in any way. When unfortunately, with the case of the Catholic Church, the adults and seminarians issue is of equal weight to the abuse of underage persons. So that was immediately a disappointment. Other than that, from what I've heard of others' reactions, a lot of important people with lots of titles joined together and spoke. It's the clericalism of loving to speak and not really doing much action.
Yeah, unfortunately, and that's having paid attention to varying degrees over the years to what goes on with Rome and what comes out of Rome on a typical basis. that's pretty much what I expected. There's still, I think there's this sense still within certain corners of the Catholic Church that the rest of the world cares what the documents say. Now, I might care, but I guarantee you, the person sitting next to me in the pew probably doesn't even know they happened. Probably doesn't has the slightest. And this is broadly speaking, any issue that they decide to get together and address, almost nobody even knows it happens anymore. And the idea that just doing that is going to have some big impact, no, it's not. And and I've read a number of documents over time, and a lot of them, it's a lot of words that you can pour whatever meaning you want into them. And unfortunately, that's been there's a lot more going on there than just lazy writing or incompetence in writing. There's reasons why they are written the way they are, precisely so you can pour whatever meaning you want into them. But because there are a lot of people that are in charge of running various aspects of the Catholic Church that, frankly, are not very good Catholics. Now, that aside, as far as this particular issue itself, they came out with an 8-point plan that that got summarized here on the Catholic Register. I'm just going to quickly run through it. It's really quick. Now, this is summarized out of Pope Francis's document. So by all means, it could there could be somewhat more to it, but we're just going to take a look at what the Register's summary is. Okay, point 1. A change of mentality to focus on protecting children rather than protecting the institution. Point 2, a recognition of the impeccable seriousness of these sins and crimes of consecrated persons. 3, a genuine purification, beginning with self-accusation. 4, positive formation of candidates in the priesthood, for the priesthood in the virtue of chastity. I actually like that one. Strengthening and reviewing of guidelines by Episcopal conferences, reaffirming the need for, and I don't know why this is in quotation marks, but rules. The accompaniment of those who have been abused, with emphasis on listening. It's true that seminarians and clergy are not enslaved to an addiction to pornography. I would say not even using it at all, not just not enslaved to an addiction, but here I am quibbling. Combat sexual tourism around the world, which what that has to do with this in particular, I don't know. Now, Paige, I read through this and I'm like, okay, this is more just stuff. A change of mentality. Really, we really shouldn't. Things you shouldn't need to say. It's protecting the children rather than the institution. And I would think most of us, at least here in the United States, learned that lesson back in the early 2000s. If we didn't know it already, we learned it then. And if you didn't learn it then, you're not gonna. Impeccable seriousness. No kidding. Thanks. Thanks for calling that to attention. Duh. Self-accusation. Again, we, for crying out loud, we're the church that has confession. We do this a lot. It's called Catholic guilt is a thing for a reason.
Yeah.
You know, the positive formation of candidates. Yes, we should definitely be forming them in the importance of chastity, which is not just the absence of sex. It's also like a full-on mentality, a way of looking at the relation between the sexes. Yes, that we really do need to focus on forming that better. Strengthening guidelines, sure. Obviously, that does need to happen. Accompaniment. I hate words like that. I hate words like accompaniment. It's like, this is just high-minded, mealy-mouthed nonsense that doesn't mean anything. It's like if you're trying to say, you know what, hey, we're going to help you deal with it, just say that. You know, again, the pornography thing, really, I don't know. So that's what I see when I see this page. I don't know. What do you see? Do you see anything of one? Do you actually see anything new? Because I don't. I don't really see anything new there.
No, all I hear is essentially things that have been being said for decades now.
Yep.
And I suppose, I mean, again, yes, just like you said, none of this we shouldn't have to say any of this.
Right.
It should be obvious. And so after a while, when you hear, if you go back and look at some of the responses back last year to the Pennsylvania grand jury report, and you hear bishops saying, well, we failed to protect the little ones.
No kidding.
Yes, no kidding. But guess what? I mean, in a lot of these cases, you didn't just fail to protect them. You served them up.
Yeah.
So you just get tired of hearing these beautifully worded statements that are hollow as hell.
Yes. I couldn't agree more. Now,
but especially what disturbs me is that, say, going back to Cardinal McCarrick, who Vigano exposed as, he's just a pervert. He's just a filthy, filthy man who engaged in horrendous acts with seminarians. Some of it was not consensual. I mean, it was just a power trip for him. And it was abusive and it was predatory.
Yes.
Well, he appointed the Pope knew about that already.
And let's be clear, we're talking about Pope Francis at the moment.
That's correct. Pope Francis, sorry. He already knew about this, but jumping ahead, McCarrick's the one who recommended Cupid for... yeah, I hear the sigh. Yeah, I get it. He's the one who recommended him for... Me either. And he's the one who recommended Cupid for this summit that just took place in February. But if you go back to August, when Vigano is exposing McCarrick, Cupid goes on the news and says, regarding all of this, because this is about cover of abuse of multiple institutions. He was the head of a seminary in different places and moved around. And Cupid's quote was, the Pope has a bigger agenda. He's got to get on with things of talking about the environment and protecting migrants and carrying on the work of the church. We're not going to go down a rabbit hole on this.
Right.
So abuse to him was a rabbit hole. It was a distraction from environmentalism.
Yeah.
It was a distraction from migration.
Yeah.
And then now he's at this summit as a leader.
Yeah, it really gets to
I'm not surprised.
It is. I saw that statement from him on the news. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. We're not a rabbit hole. This is a tangent. Are you bonkers? We need more solar panels? Are you freaking kidding me right now? One, priorities, pal. Two, that crap isn't even in your lane. By all means, opine, have your opinions. But I'm sorry, environmentalism and worrying about migration is not, in fact, the work of the church. Taking care of a migrant who comes to your door, that is the work of the church. Worrying about national policy on that sort of thing, yeah, not so much, man. It's like,
so essentially you have this show trial, this show summit with people who really don't take any of this seriously, and their 8-point plan was just a reiteration of policies that have been around for 2,000 years.
Yeah, and you mentioned that one of the more concrete aspects of this, changing some legal procedures in the Vatican itself, has to do with the expanded definition of vulnerable persons, which kind of, on one hand, could be used to more severely prosecute certain things. On the other hand, it seems like it could wind up skewing the data or skewing perceptions of the abuse. I would say the jury's probably still out on exactly how that's going to play out, but I think the definite danger is there, because I think you were taking you're winding up conflating two different things position, which I can definitely see that.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So now there is something to be said here. The Catholic Church usually doesn't work the way a lot of her detractors and staunch supporters think it does, which is to say that the Pope issues extremely granular decrees from on high and everyone falls immediately in line. That's not the way the church typically works. In all honesty, usually the way the church works does issue some broad guidelines, and the different dioceses or bishops' conferences, which I don't have a lot of use for the bishops' conferences. They actually have no place in the traditional structure of the church whatsoever. But beside the point, usually goes into bishops' conferences, and then it goes to like the individual dioceses, and they kind of fill in the details at least ideally, they fill in the details. They apply the broad outlines as it best applies to them. There's essentially the bishops and the bishops throughout the world, and even individual priests within a diocese, have a fair degree of autonomy, much more than a lot of people think, and that can be good and bad. Here we see if the bishops are allowed to be too independent, they wind up not doing anything, which has often been the case on this and various other issues. They wind up issuing their own decrees and everything that sometimes run contrary. They get used to doing things their own way. In any case, here I would definitely like to see a stronger hand saying, especially since, as we already mentioned, the big issue here was brought up by Archbishop Vigano and others now, that the bishops, the archbishops, the cardinals within the church are often the people that are running this cover-up. And there needs to be some sort of way to report, expose, and hold these people accountable. Problem is, right now, without strong support for that from literally the very top, from the Pope himself, I don't know how that's possible. He did finally get around to laicizing McCarrick, as we said, but there's been issues with him as Paige, you're aware, I'm sure, of some of the other issues, some of the other bishops and everything, especially in South America, that Pope Francis might have been looking the other way on.
That's I know what you're talking about.
Yes,
and I don't have his name, but there are several. That is at the. So basically, for everyone who's listening, Pope Francis was over Argentina, and so there was a school in Argentina. It also had a location in Verona, Italy. And there are these awful charges and accusations coming out, and there are more and more questions about what Pope Francis knew before he was Pope Francis, when he was still in Argentina, and how much he looked away. What did he do? Did he intervene? Did he assist in any cover-up? But the school is called Antonio Provolo Institute, and it was a school for deaf children. A boarding school. It was Benedict XVI who actually ordered an investigation into it. There has been arrests made. The accusations coming from now adults who attended the school, it's pretty horrific. This was, again, a school for deaf children, so they were extremely vulnerable. It was a boarding school, so they were isolated there. And their family sent them there to be educated, truly believing in the church and truly believing that they were putting their kids in safe hands. And instead, it was just a predatory playground. And in fact, the children were even prevented from using sign language. What? So they were isolated even further, the priest prevented them from communicating with one another.
That is crazy.
There was one instance where I got a 7-year-old boy was raped by, and you can go online and search his name. He was arrested. He's in Italy now. He's 83 years old. His priest. Yeah. And he basically just bore down on this poor child's back so severely that it permanently damaged the child's spine. And the child became addicted to painkillers, but came forward before dying of an overdose. In another instance, a child was forced to wear a diaper for the day to hide the bleeding that occurred after abuse. It's bad. Oh. This was occurring under Pope Francis's watch.
Back when he was Jorge Bergoglio. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's pretty rough. And there's been allegations that he's kind of looked the other way on abuse cover-ups in Peru and Honduras, which I believe Vigano actually predicted that we can expect stuff to start breaking out from Honduras anytime. Which I think some things have started to trickle out of there. It's like, oh, okay. So basically it's just going for a while. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Now, on the getting better aspect, much to, I think, pretty much everyone's surprise, Pope Emeritus Benedict, he decided to weigh in on this just this past Thursday, actually. He dropped a 6,000-word essay on the issue on kind of what he sees as the real causes of this. And Paige, did you? I haven't had a chance to read the whole thing myself, but have you had a chance to look at it, or?
I have. I didn't have a chance to read the whole thing either.
Okay. But we've both seen different articles. We've both seen articles on it.
That's correct. And he basically addressed which is kind of a parallel and intersecting issue going on with the church. It was never discussed and was kind of hushed and kept from discussion at the summit. Yeah. So he basically came out and talked about it.
Yeah.
And that was the presence of, it's a prevalence. They're everywhere. It's basically homosexual cliques is what he called them.
Yeah.
That have created organized, sometimes sex trafficking, and it has a lot to do with the seminaries. So if you are a young seminarian and you go to seminary, you could actually be raped because these cliques are basically operating to cover each other. So it's not just about the issue of homosexuality, but it goes over into allowing, hey, we all have, this thing we're doing and we're not supposed to do it. We're supposed to be celibate and we're all going to look the other way. Well, you end up looking at the other way at other stuff too.
Yep. It really is. There's so many issues at play here. But one is definitely, there was this strange, and where it came from is perhaps specifically where it came from perhaps is a matter of debate, but yes, there was this at the very least implicit, if not outright, acceptance of homosexual activity by many members of the clergy. especially really ramping up back in the 60s and stuff when, like I said, a lot of this abuse started. And all of the data shows that we're dealing primarily with homosexual activity. Almost every case is a priest and a young man or a young boy. Almost every case.
That's correct.
There are women and there are young women and young girl cases that has happened, but they're the minority. All the activity is either pedophilia or homosexual in nature, and most of the pedophilia is homosexual type pedophilia in nature. So he's absolutely right to call that out. And yeah, Rome has really not been willing to go there. Not really. Not since Benedict actually back when he was in charge actually said, okay, and again, this seems like it should be obvious. But if you have homosexual tendencies, no priesthood for you.
That's right. That's right. It's very simple.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that doesn't. It's like even if, and there was an argument even amongst Orthodox Catholics. Well, it's like if they had the tendency, but they understand the teaching of the church, they're trying to live a chaste life. Why can't they be a priest? It's like, well, it's kind of like, let's face it, you're kind of saying, if you're an alcoholic, why don't you work in the bar? Just don't put yourself in the situations where you might be tempted, especially since it's a fair bet that Benedict probably at least suspected what was going on in the seminaries by that point, even if he was getting stuff kept from him. The guy's not an idiot. Anyway, although I will say this, I actually know of one priest who was a practicing homosexual way back in the day, back in the 60s and 70s, and he's a fantastic priest now. Mm-hmm. He really is. I won't bother saying his name now, but I might mention it to you off air, Paige, because you might know who he is even. He's sufficiently famous that lots of people would recognize his name. But in any case,
well, in 2004, there was a report released.
The John Jay report.
That's right, and it was looking at the profiling the victims from 1950 to 2002, and over 80% were post-pubescent males. Mm-hmm. So, and at the time, back at the sexual revolution, when all of this started, and sexual teachings in the church kind of became lax in the seminaries and so forth, and that it was just kind of people started playing.
Yep.
And not upholding their vows of celibacy or morality in general,
or anything. I talked to the godparents of my the godparents of my second child, my oldest son. They're old enough that they remember a lot of this, and I was talking to one of them, and she to the godmother, and she was like, "Oh yeah, it was the wild, wild west. People were doing all kinds of people were like consecrating Oreo cookies and pizza," and she was not joking. And so it wasn't just the moral practice; it was everything. In the wake of Vatican II, and this wasn't Vatican II's fault. I read some of the documents of Vatican II; they're solid stuff, but the way it was presented, the way Vatican II was presented and packaged to the world, completely changed the way people perceived the church. And there's a lot of and some of that even honestly goes back to, I think unintentionally, some of the statements of Pope John the 23rd, the guy who started the council, giving some of that impression. And a lot of people saw a big opportunity there to make change, to basically, honestly, I think, to destroy the church. I think they saw there was an opportunity there. There was a window that they could come in and they could significantly damage, if not utterly destroy the church. And I think people tried to do that. And yes, the subsequent complete dropping of many aspects of Catholic moral teaching, and in the wake of the council, massive. And Pope Benedict goes on to say, and it's not even just that, it's we've lost our sense of who God is and what our proper relationship to him is, because we don't even talk about it anymore. Not enough at any rate. It's all like you said a while ago, Paige, quoting Bishop Cupich, however the crap you say his name, Crapich. Anyway, I couldn't resist.
Might as well be.
I couldn't resist. I'm sorry. It's like it's all become what he said. It's social justice, environmentalistic nonsense, and that's what's been driving entirely too much of the church's activity, teaching, homilies for quite some time now. It's not like that everywhere. In a lot of places, it's starting to turn around, but it has been that way for a while, and this is part of the fruit of that. Because if you don't know who God is, what our relationship is to him, you will lose the moral teaching. And if you lose the moral teaching, eventually you will start to just do stuff and justify it to yourself and come up with as you said, a finely worded, mealy-mouthed statement that seems to justify anything you want it to. Sorry,
that's right.
bit of a rant there.
I'm on it with you. I'm on that train with you.
Now Benedict has been that his statement has been criticized for also being short on practical solutions, which is true. It's also not his place right now. It's not his job. As a Catholic, one of the last things I want to do is I don't want to see competing papal authorities. We've been there, done that. Never goes well. For anyone who knows anything about history, and I know Paige does, there have been a few times back in history when there were multiple people claiming to be the Pope, and now that it does not go well. Usually there's wars. And big time. So, but he does get to the real heart of the issue, and the real heart of the issue is you've got to return back to our relationship with God. You need genuine, real repentance, not self-accusation, not being aware of the impeccable seriousness. We don't need a change of mentality. We need to remember that we are sinners in need of God's mercy. And that's everyone. And right now, especially in context, these bishops that have covered up for that sometimes are monsters themselves and have covered up for these monsters.
That's right. And Benedict was actually very tough on sex abuse.
He was, yes.
Yeah, so at one point, he was defrocking at least 3 bishops a month. I mean, he kicked out hundreds and hundreds of people within just even a 3-year period, I believe from 2009 to 2012. He was very tough, and he went specifically after the hierarchical players who had been a lot of times we say covering up, but really I think it's enabling. So that's who he went after.
Yeah. I think in some cases enabling is definitely fair.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you cover it up, you're enabling it to continue.
Yeah, that's true.
And go ahead.
No, I think that's true. I think there is. I think way back when it first started, when they were trying to figure out when they were trying to figure out what to do about it, like when the abuse actually started back in the 60s and everything. They were kind of like, okay, what do we do about this? And shrinks were telling them, hey, we can fix this. We'll work with these guys and we'll fix them and make it better, and then they'll be okay. And a lot of bishops bought that. But you know what? Okay, but fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And at some point, after the 3rd time, you're not really fooled anymore, are you? Right. So I think there are some who got kind of suckered into it, maybe once, but because again, to be your average bishop, he's not a psychologist, he's not a psychiatrist, he doesn't know. So they say word of the expert. But then again, when you have to go through the same process with the same guy twice, no. And again, very quickly, it should have been clear that you know what, this isn't going to work. We can't rely on this to work for anybody. So fool me once, you're out, pal. Bye bye. I understand. I kind of see where they could. I can see where they might have gotten led astray a little bit, but they should very quickly have gotten themselves back on the right path, much quicker than they did. Anyway,
well,
tangent. But it very quickly became a point where yes, you're not just covering up, you're enabling. I completely agree with that.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, in my opinion, Pope Francis has been just as bad because just since he's become the Pope, because he has eased the sanctions placed on people like McCarrick, like Daniels.
Mm-hmm.
McCarrick was basically his stature, his status was basically rehabilitated by Francis.
Yeah.
And his
remind everyone what were the sanctions that McCarrick was under first before Francis kind of loosened his leash?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to go back and look, but he was not supposed to be participating in anything public.
Yeah, basically. He was essentially supposed to be on private prayer retreat until the day he dies. And
basically, John sent to the islands. This is basically what he was supposed to do: was be away and out of the spotlight and not doing any duties or anything. He was under. It's kind of like house arrest.
Yeah, which he was kind of ignoring that already anyway, even under Benedict, but under Francis, it really ramped up. He
just relaxed it.
Yeah. Francis relaxed it, and even before he relaxed it, McCarrick felt a little bit more freedom of movement to go do whatever the heck he bloody well pleased, even before Francis lifted out sanctions, for lack of a better word.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, he becomes a confidant, and he's recommending bishops to go be in charge of things having to do with the abuse crisis. And as far as I know, Cupich is still kind of Francis's point man on this stuff, at least here in the United States.
Yes.
Which and is really
McCarrick was, I believe, on the balcony when the Pope was announced that he got the job.
I believe that's correct. Now, what would you say in your perfect world? What's something that you would do to address the issue? To actually solve this, one way or the other.
That
was on the spot.
Loaded question because I don't know if you want to know my answer.
Okay, short of getting rid of the Catholic Church altogether.
Church, basically.
Yeah. Short of getting rid of the Catholic Church altogether, you Episcopalian, you.
Take apart the hierarchical barriers. I mean, first of all, people need to be able to be fired.
People do need to be able to be fired.
You can't. I'm sorry?
People do need to be able to be fired. I would agree with that.
So, see, right now it has to go all the way to the Pope. Think about how big the church is. You expect one guy to do that? No, I mean,
let's be honest, though. Let's be honest. Well, you know what? You go ahead. You go ahead. You go ahead. I don't. The point isn't to critique your thing, so you go ahead.
I'm sorry. Say that again.
So you go ahead. I won't interrupt.
I actually also, from what I understand, with the meeting in September, no, it was November of 2018, with the U.S. Catholic bishops, they had proposed changing the way that people are dismissed and changing the way that you can report bishops, because currently the way the structure is, pardon me, they can't really take actions against one another.
Right.
So those, right off the top of my head, were great propositions. Unfortunately, the Vatican stepped in and removed them from consideration.
Yes.
But those, I mean, right there. So
the Vatican basically said, don't do anything until after our big thing coming up, and just this past February.
Honestly, if it were up to me, I would shut down the seminaries right now. I would fire most of the people in charge.
Okay.
and just clean house.
Okay. Well, hey, that's an option. And honestly, if that may not be a bad way to go. At least go after. At least you probably can figure out what the problem seminaries are pretty quickly. What I would do if I could be Pope Ginger for a day, I think that would be a good way to go. It's like, okay, let's find out what seminaries are problems and what aren't. And honestly, that should be pretty easy to figure out. Which ones are actually attracting seminarians? What kind of priests are they putting out? You should be, after a couple of months, you should be able to figure that one out. And then,
that's right.
If it's a problem, shut it down at least temporarily. Or
also eliminate all of the people who are proposing relaxing moral standards in the church. They've got to go. Yes,
that's an obvious one. I completely agree. And one of the things that has been clear here, almost every single bishop that has been named as part of this has been someone who's advocating for the relaxation of standards, screwing around with the liturgy, doing all kinds of things like that. Basically, anyone who's advocating for watering down the church's teaching on anything, be careful. Right away, the warning antenna should go up. Spidey sense should be tingling.
That's right. And a lot of this comes out of Rome, out of the Curia. So I think also that would have to be just literally, I'm sorry, people, but you just lost your job. Like, we're just going to take everybody in and let them go, because this is all a series of, it's a good old boys network, because it's just men covering up for their friends. And then a lot of these guys have escaped church judicial justice. And in a lot of cases been promoted to higher positions because their friends were important and made that happen, made the investigations go away, made is it the Rota?
Oh, yeah. I know.
Basically back them off.
See, I would definitely go, and I'd be recruiting people like Cardinal Burke, Archbishop Chaput, and Cardinal Sarah. I'd be going to these guys and be like, okay, you guys, you're in charge of fixing this mess. Give me, you get autonomy. You get to pick your team and root this out. Totally. And
that includes homosexual priests, even if they are good priests.
I would disagree with that, only insofar as if they're obviously not, if they're good priests, one, they're not practicing. If they've been practicing priests for, I don't know, let's just say 10 years, and there haven't been any issues, I don't know. I'd be like, you stay where you're at, because again, there haven't been any issues. You're being an awesome preacher. Yeah, then yeah, but I would definitely stick with the whole, if you got a homosexual tendency, doors closed, man. No.
Well, only certain people should be in the position of priest.
I agree.
So the church itself has to reestablish that that's actually important, that standards are important, and that their behavior matters.
Oh yeah. I'm talking about people.
About mercy.
Yeah, I'm not talking about people who are practicing, of course. I'm talking about people who, yes, they've had the tendency in the past. They may even have practiced in the past before they were priests. I'm talking about that. If there hasn't been an issue for X number of years at all, and they certainly, again, I'm talking about a good priest, one who actually believes what the church teaches, preaches what the church teaches, lives what the church teaches. I'm talking about those guys. I'm not, you stray from that. See ya. That's all I'm saying.
And I have sympathy with that. And I do sympathize with that view.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When I look at other churches
mm-hmm.
that don't have the specific difficulties that the Catholic Church has right now,
mm-hmm.
I understand that in that situation better. My
mm-hmm.
view is that
mm-hmm.
given the issues right now,
right.
If it were me, I would just say, no, we have to start over.
Well, yeah. But again, by and large, I agree. And my stance is largely based on the fact that I know this one particular priest who is one of the best priests I've ever met. One of the best priests I've ever heard preach. Runs probably the most vibrant parish in my diocese right now. Is the hardest core guy I'm around. So yeah, that's a guy I ain't kicking him out.
Mm-hmm.
He's got to give me a reason to kick him out. Mm-hmm. And yeah.
But we also have to watch our own mm-hmm. tendencies.
Oh, agreed.
Toward
mm-hmm.
Toward favoritism, whether mm-hmm. it's theological favoritism.
I agree.
Because,
I agree completely.
Conservatives and liberals,
yeah.
or political favoritism, because a lot of
mm-hmm.
people think, they hear the Catholic Church and they see it as kind of homogenous, but it's not. There are divisions in the church and these sects that kind of war with each other,
mm-hmm.
just like interdenominational issues,
mm-hmm.
Or the Baptists, and a different denomination.
Right.
So,
no, I completely see your.
Yeah, these alleynships are formed in the buddy system, and you and I are equally susceptible to falling into that.
Oh no disagreement whatsoever. I completely agree with that. As I would still have, as soon as there's an issue, I don't care if there's an actual issue. There's a door. But in the case of, I've got to wait for an issue. Mm-hmm. Not like evidence of there was something in the past that, you got let in the door because it was people believe you were repentant. Like I said, if you're repentant and it's been shown you're repentant, again. But again, as far as anybody coming in with any sort of tendency, I don't care how repentant they think they are. No, we're not taking the chance. Statistically speaking, it's not a chance we're taking, pal. I'm sorry. Go, I don't know. Go, I don't know, do something else. Just be holy in your own life, essentially. But in any case, I think we are just about wrapped up here, Paige. And, actually, one thing I did want to get to, because it came up on Twitter, I think you saw it, was one of the things that always gets brought up with this. Why not allow priests to marry? That'll fix it.
I know. But that neglects the many people who have been celibate and faithful. Mm-hmm. This isn't a they can't marry thing. So this is right. People have free will, and they should control their impulses. And that's and sexual abuse isn't necessarily, first of all, sexual gratification. A lot of it is about power. And that's not going to go away with marriage. Look at the Southern Baptist Church right now. That has not gone away with marriage.
Right. Which is the point that I usually make. Statistically speaking, a person is more likely to be abused by a family member in their own home than they are by a priest. And the stats on the percentage of priests are still actually quite low. I believe it depends a little bit on who you ask, but I believe lower than the general population statistics still. But some would say it's equal with the general population. Whichever. Certainly no worse, actually, than the general population of statistics. Same percentage of priests abuses the same number of butchers who can marry. Same number of Protestant pastors who can marry. It's not a matter of that at all, actually. But for the sake of clarity, this is actually the one thing that's always on people's laundry list of things that the church would like to change. This is the one thing that actually could change at the drop of a hat. It is not actually doctrine that a priest has to be celibate. It is a matter of practice, not doctrine. The Pope could wake up tomorrow and say, you know what? Married priests, that's going to be a thing now. And okay, fine. I would just be like, well, that was sudden, but okay. Because again, it's not doctrine. It's just changing a very long held and practice that has served the church well overall. But yeah, it actually could change. It's just this is the wrong reason to change it. In all honesty, this doesn't.
Right. That wouldn't solve this problem.
Exactly, because again, as you've covered, the Protestant world has many of its own issues with this. The rest of the world has many of its own issues with this sort of thing. That's not gonna change a thing. Statistically speaking, it's not. It doesn't make any difference whatsoever. So, not helping at all. Actually, I mean, I see why on the surface you would think so, but scratch the surface a little bit, and it winds up essentially being irrelevant to the issue. If you want to say let priests marry, and another thing actually that I always like to bring up, it's not like the church is springing people on this as soon as they hand them their collar. It's not like, okay, here's your collar, and by the way, you don't get to get married. What? It's not exactly a secret. Yeah, exactly. You kind of know that when you go into seminary in the first place. Like, if I do this, I'm not going to be able to get married. Okay, that's right. It's like, well, and that's something that always makes me, because it's always treated almost in a way like, how can you dare force those priests to not marry? They kind of made that call on their own. We're not like running around roping kids out of the altar server ranks and be like, you're going to be a priest. No sex for you, ever. Oh no!
And think about how many people cheat on their spouses.
Right.
that hasn't helped fidelity. Marriage actually doesn't seem to have helped fidelity at all.
No.
I mean, it's just not the right solution to sexual abuse here. It's not going to do anything.
No. So to kind of wrap things up, I think at the end of the day, what Benedict is saying is right. You got to get back to God, understanding our relationship with Him. Everything starts there. Everything. In various parts of the Catholic world, and I think within the broader Christian world, I think there are many people that are beginning to understand this. My own parish is an example. It was, when I first started attending there, a fairly typical, for lack of a better terminology, left of center parish. and you could see it. You could see it in the people. You could hear it in the homilies. You could see it in the limited iconography around the place. In the way Mass was conducted, you could see it. It's changing. The priest who's there now, he realized there was a problem, and is going about fixing it. And he's fixing it by slowly taking the parish back to what it is to actually be Catholic. And it's happening on all of those things. It's happening in the iconography, in the way the Mass is conducted, in the homilies. Everything is kind of is getting back to the roots of the church, and that is exactly the right approach. And once that is fixed, everything else will be much, much easier to fix, because there won't be that acceptance that acceptance of this guy can get away with such and such because he's higher. It's like, no. He may still have authority, but that doesn't mean he's infallible. Which I don't misread that word. And this guy may have authority, but that doesn't mean everything he does is perfect. That doesn't mean I can't question him. We can. We should. And
that's right.
As we get back,
yeah. And one of the more positive, actually, now that we're touching on this, one of the more positive things I have actually heard, and I don't remember if it was with the summit or if it was last summer around the Pennsylvania grand jury report, but the church did issue a reminder that they were not supposed to be better than the people. That kind of clericalism, I guess you could call it,
right?
Nicolaitanism, hierarchy was perverted, and I thought that was actually very positive, and I was really actually very surprised to hear the church say it, because that is a really huge problem here. So it is important for people to remember that the root of the church is not in that hierarchy.
Yep.
And we are supposed to question people. We are supposed to be Bereans and check their words against Scripture. We're supposed to use discernment to judge their actions. We're not supposed to just follow along blindly. No. Simply because someone has a collar.
Oh, no. Absolutely not. And, well, gosh, honestly, this conversation could go on in so many different tangents, Paige. It really could. But I think...
And this is not a problem that is singular to Rome, though.
Yeah, no, it is not.
This is a problem that has really... There are some Protestant churches that are really suffering with this right now, too. This Nicolaitanism.
Yeah, and I think there's...
This hierarchy where it's abused. So it's important for people to remember that.
Yeah, I think it's... And, yeah, it takes on a different flavor in the Catholic world than it does in the Protestant world because of some of the differences. And different Protestant churches it's gonna take on a different flavor with them. Like it's gonna work a little bit differently in your non-denom church down the street than it is with the Southern Baptist Convention. Than it is with the Catholic Church. The abuse itself, it'll all operate a little bit differently. It'll be covered up a little bit differently because there's unique aspects to the way each of these different places are organized. For example, in non-denom world, it's really easy for a council, a church council, whatever they may call it, the council of elders, whatever they call it, to say, you know what, we don't like you, boop, boop, out you go. And he says, okay, takes a psalter in his hand and sulks on down the road. But it's also really easy for him to go to the Notre Dame church 2 towns over and do the same thing all over again.
That's right.
The hierarchy doesn't, like I said, different flavors. There's weaknesses. There's different weaknesses in the different structures or lack thereof.
Mm-hmm. And the polity isn't all. Each of the Protestant churches has a different polity and a different structure.
Exactly.
So they're not all the same either. The Episcopal Church has a hierarchy.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Very, very much so. Ending with the Queen of England, but that would be a fun. You know what, Paige? In 2 weeks after Easter, we're going to have Faith Moore back on, and we're going to be talking about Henry VIII.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yeah. So
that would be a fun topic.
be sure to tune in for that episode, because
I will.
me, Crystal, and Faith all have like a particular interest in that era of English history.
Mm-hmm.
Faith knows a lot about the Tudors in general, and she's a huge Catherine of Aragon fame. Hope I pronounced that right. And I, of course, being the good Catholic boy, I'm a huge fan of St. Thomas More. So it's good. Yeah, it's going to be a really good episode. So that's going to be in 3 weeks. So anyway, Paige, thanks a lot for coming on and talking about this. I really hope that sometime in the near future this can be put to bed. But honestly, my hopes for that are relatively slim at the moment. So I'm sure we'll be having you on to discuss this again. But next time we'll try to have you on to discuss something a little less depressing.
Sounds great.
And in the meantime, for those, again, you can go back and you can watch you can watch the series that I did on the abuse crisis. I need to organize that into a playlist. Hopefully I'll do that soon-ish. But there will be no show next week because Easter. And the week after that, we're going to have Eric Blake of Hardboiled Films on the show, and we're going to be discussing something a little bit lighter. We're going to be talking only a little bit lighter. It's the DCEU. We're going to talk about the DCEU. So like I said, only a little lighter. The ups and downs of that particular shared cinematic universe. And then after that, like I said, Faith Moore will be back on, and we'll be talking about Henry VIII. And Eowyn, I saw your thing in the chat. I'm contemplating maybe we need to have somebody on to discuss why on earth we have a pope in the first place. I think I'm going to work on that. I think that'll be interesting. So with that being said, yes. So Paige, thanks again for coming on. And thanks for everyone for tuning in. And until 2 weeks from now, keep fighting the good fight.